It's about going home. It's about going home. The familiar story of Joseph and Mary traveling to a little town in Bethlehem describes a homecoming. The word that's typically translated, even in the Charlie Brown version of the gospel, as in, I-N-N. The word that's typically translated as in from Luke chapter 2, verse 7 is kataluma, right? And kataluma literally means guest room. Guest room. And just think for a minute about what that might do for your understanding of the Luke chapter 2 account. Instead of seeing the pregnant mother of Jesus alone in a strange town, turned away by the manager of Motel 6, where they always leave a light on for you. Instead of that, there's the option of seeing her on the edge of a vibrant, festive household that is brimming with all kinds of avuncular and obscure relatives. Things are crazy because of the census that's been ordered in Rome. Uncle Jehoshaphat has already sacked out with his wife Milcah and assorted cousins, and they're all stacked around him, snoring already in the guest room. There's no room for an unexpected woman who is expecting. And just think about that. Mary comes into the scene. Joseph is returning to his original family hometown, right? He is known, but Mary is unknown. And it's a little awkward. And I think this awkwardness makes us wince. Wince. To wince, as many of you know, is an involuntary grimace or a shrinking back of the facial muscles. It's sort of like a cringe, almost. People wince when they're surprised or caught off guard, right? People step back and they, something's happening, something's coming at me. A ball is being deflected and it's about to hit me in the face. I'm going to wince. A rock is being tossed into the windshield. I wince. But I've also observed people wincing when they're blindsided by a shift in the social circumstances. You know what I mean? For instance, if an ex-girlfriend or boyfriend or an ex-lover, unbeknownst to you, shows up at a party, your friends wince. This is going to be awkward. I saw a Budweiser beer commercial recently in which a sports fan thought it would be fun to have a Bud Light vendor at his disposal in places other than the baseball game, right? He saw the Bud Light vendor and he said, that would be great to have that all the time. And the Bud Light vendor is shouting, Bud Light here! Bud Light here! And so in the commercial, the Bud Light vendor, is there in the bedroom when the guy wakes up. Bud Light here! Right? And he just reaches out and grabs the Bud Light. Bud Light here as he gets out of the shower. Bud Light here as he's getting his hair cut. Bud Light here as he's at the dentist office or works in the cubicle. But when the vendor shows up at the cemetery during a funeral service, the man cringes. He winces in that context. Wincing is a remarkable effect, I think. It anticipates this radical change. And I'm tracking this idea with you, this apparent rabbit trail, for a very biblical reason. That is, I think many characters in the story of Christmas wince. And they wince precisely because they're invited not to worry. And yet all the circumstances would seem to suggest you better start worrying. Consider the shepherds fighting off their drowsiness in the fields. And then, bam! The glory of the Lord ignites the sky and the angelic voices say, Don't be afraid. Are you kidding me? Don't be afraid? Maybe they're struggling with that command when they wince. What's happening? Wincing is an involuntary thing. It happens to believers and non-believers alike. It's also involuntary when the writer of Revelation 21 describes the New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven. What in the world is that supposed to look like? A whole city lit on fire, brilliant with light, coming down out of the clouds? Like some kind of UFO? Like some kind of meteor that's meant to change the climate? Don't be afraid. Don't worry. John says, I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, see, the home of God is among mortals. That's what it means. You see, there's this theme, both in the fourth Sunday in Advent and on Christmas Eve, that goes like this. If you're yearning for home, if you're contemplating, where's my home? You have the option of wincing. In other words, anticipating some radical change. In Frank Capra's classic film, It's a Wonderful Life, there's a scene that leaps off the screen and into the depths of our despair. It's a 1946 film, so it's a little hokey, right? After World War II, people were in the mood for nostalgia. And the film depicts George Bailey returning home to Bedford Falls, New York, only it's not Bedford Falls anymore. Instead, because George has been given the chance to experience life as if he were never born, Mr. Potter has run rampant over the Bailey building and loan and closed it down. He's bought up all the properties and charged people exorbitant rent. The economics are terrible. And consequently, the sign at the entrance to this once quaint community now reads Pottersville. And George, in this scene, returns to this town and he talks to a neighbor, and the neighbor says, don't you think I know where I live? And suddenly he realizes that he's a stranger in his own town. And the people that supposedly know him best, and the people that he's known all his life, his own mother, his Uncle Billy, Bert the cop, Ernie the taxi driver, Mary, his wife, are all suddenly strangers. Even, and this is the part that gets me, even the petals, even his daughter Zuzu's petals that he secretly stuck in his pants pocket are not there because Zuzu doesn't even exist. And it's this petrifying moment of despair. It'll probably be on television again. You watch it, the scene when Jimmy Stewart, playing George Bailey, his face just fills the screen, and it's the best face that depicts the despair that I think we've all encountered, right? Where am I? Am I all alone? Do I have a home? Now, what's interesting about It's a Wonderful Life and the Bible is that they both depict angels. And we've talked a little bit about angels in this study on Revelation. And we've said that angels are messengers. God is too holy to show up, right, all the time and make God's self completely evident. So God sends angelic messengers. And the angel in the nostalgic film, of course, differs from the angels in Luke's gospel and in the book of Revelation. There's a big difference between Clarence, who's this dead guy from the 1700s who's been made an angel and may earn his wings, and the angels that are depicted in the Bible, which are these amazingly eternal creatures that are meant to point the way to God. But they both the angel in the film and the angels in the Bible have this distinct modus operandi in common, and it's this. They both tell us to re-enter, to go home again. In other words, when you feel the most despair, when you feel like you want to escape because it's too intense, because life is too anxious, because there's too much to worry about, go back. Go back home, re-enter your house from a different road. Prepare to wince. Don't worry about keeping or losing the people that you love. Don't worry. Don't worry, as the song says, about the fates allowing you to gather again for Auld Lang Syne. Wince at the glorious, blinding beauty of people right now. Right now. Right now. Thomas Merton, in the Confessions of a Bystander, said, "There was no way for me to tell people they were walking around shining like the sun." He says, in Louisville, Kentucky, at the corner of 4th and Walnut, in the center of the shopping distance, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all these people, strangers, that they were mine and I was theirs, that we could not be alien to one another, even though we were total strangers. It was like waking from a dream of separateness. This is the message of Christmas. God doesn't remain separate, but comes in the flesh. I have to admit, in many of my dreams, and my wife Cheryl has experienced many of my dreams with me, I curse. And one time I knocked over a lamp. And in my dreams, I wince. I wince because I'm often dreaming about something coming after me, right? Something that's going to do me harm. Something large and threatening. There's a car that's about to crash. There's a building about to collapse. There's an airplane that's nosediving into a mountainside. And in my dream, there's no escape. And so I wince. And then I wake up. But you see, what if Christmas suggests that what's coming at us isn't threatening at all, but reconciling? You and I wince because we're so accustomed to people living separate lives. But the wince suggests we're meant to be reconciled. You and I wince, not because an old lover has showed up at the party, but because love is the fundamental power in the universe. You and I wince, not because the Bud Light vendor has showed up at the cemetery, but because Jesus is the firstborn of the dead ones. Do I believe this? Crash into me. Dave Matthews sings this song, crash into me. Oh, when you come, crash into me. Crash into me in a boy's dream, in a girl's dream. Crash into me. And you know, when I sing these songs, and I know some of these Christmas songs are really hard to sing, Jim, you're doing a great job. When I sing these songs, I say, crash into me. I don't want this holiday to float away on esoteric sentimentalism. I want it to be sending me back home into my relationships. Something is coming. Someone is coming. The birth is coming. It's painful. But ultimately, it's nothing to worry about. Don't worry. Wince. Wince at all the nonsense and all the injustice that's about to be obliterated in the twinkling of an eye. Wince at all the hate and all the loneliness and all the regret that's about to vanish as the new heaven and the new earth break through the clouds. Wince. Don't worry. Just wince.